neighbors, this is Sharon from Grace's Neighbor Sharon, and this video is part of the What Would You Make playlist for March. I chose to do an Easter theme and feature the color yellow. I will tell you a little bit more about this playlist later on in the video. For now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the video. Project number 1, the Hive Beaded Wreath. I'm coming to you from chilly Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and I don't have my microphone, so I'm going to try and speak as loud and clear as possible. But I do apologize if you have difficulty hearing me. I'm showing you the supplies that I purchased at Dollarama. I'm staying in a small town just outside of Ontario, or just outside of Ottawa, I should say. And these are some things I picked up at the local Dollarama, and that ribbon I brought with me. I have some acrylic paint in yellow, black, and white. And let's get started. I'm going to paint these square beads on this beaded wreath. Half black, half yellow. I'm going to add a little bit of water because I don't want it gloppy and dark. I actually wanted it to be more like a wash, but this paint is so pigmented. The beads really took the color. I'm just guesstimating here how many to put in each color. I end up having a few too many black, but I just put it on the part of the wreath where the bow is going to be, and that's totally okay. I had to add more paint here and more water. And then I took some little sugar spoons and stirred them all up. I swear, doing these beads was like half this project. I scooped them out, leaving the excess paint in the bowl. And that's just parchment paper I'm using there. So it doesn't soak up the paint, but it does provide a surface where it can dry without, sticking really bad. So after a while, I scoop them onto a paper plate. I figured any dampness would actually be soaked up by that sort of like cardboardy paper. And I moved on. So I bought these wood letters at the Dollarama, and I figured if I use them in every single project, that's my wood. However, the beads in this project are wood, this arrow is wood, and the letters are wood. So we got all our bases covered. I'm just using a tiny bit of black paint and the tip of that foam brush to dab the color onto the letters. And now I'm using the yellow paint, and I'm using the foam brush like a regular paintbrush. But wow, it's super bright. So I tapped out a little bit of orange and a little bit of black. And I sort of defined the edges, kind of like a distress, but kind of just defining the outside edges so you could see the shape of the arrow. And it has those cool little cut edges on the end to make it look a little bit more rustic. And I also ran that paintbrush over the middle of the arrow just to give it a little bit of a rustic look. Now I'm just setting out the beads, kind of like doing a dry fit. I wanted to see how many extra ones I had, and then I set those aside and threaded them on first because that's going to end up at the top. And there's Sable. That's one of my sister's cats. She's a 4-month-old kitten, and I had to scoop her up and get her out of my way there. So you see, I finally got all of the beads on there, and I had to borrow a tool to keep them on, to bend the wire to keep them on. I don't have any of my tools here with me, but the wire was so thick, it was really hard to move. But anyway, I'm hot gluing the hive letters onto the arrow there, and then I'm going to hot glue the arrow onto the beads. Give it a little pat, that means it's going to stay. And then I have these cute little bees, also purchased from Dollarama. They're not wood, I'm not quite sure. what they're made out of, maybe plastic or resin or something. But I'm just going to hot glue a few at the front of the arrow and the back of the arrow, since the hive is actually our little bee home. It said the hive on the back, but I didn't like the images that were with it. That's why I flipped it over and did my own letters. Here's the awareness tree scrunched into a bow, wrapped with some baker's twine here in the middle. I'm going to tie a really tight knot on the back and poof up the loops. And you want to check and make sure it's even on both sides. You can sort of adjust it by moving the knot to one side or the other. I'm going to hot glue that on top where those black beads are. And I'm going to do some dovetails. And a good look at this during the final reveal. Okay, jumping in with a little bit more information about the playlist. It happens every month. What would you make? Just means use wood in all your projects. Our hosts are Brenda from Rustic and Lace DIY and Christine from Divine Designs. Our guest host this month is Sheryl from Farmhouse Frugally. I'll have their channel links and a link to the playlist in my description box below, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the video. Project number 2, Spring Wood Round. I'm using this masking tape to get a good idea of where the middle of this wood round is, and then I'm doing a dry fit with some of my letters. I want the words to be welcome, spring, and I want to make sure that word welcome fit all the way across, and it does. So let's get started. I have this white acrylic paint, and I'm going to do like a light distress kind of coat. I didn't want it like thick and full coverage because I wanted it to be noticeable that I am using wood. I end up getting a pretty full coverage, but that's okay because I'm going to define the edges and give it a little bit more of a rustic look like I did in the previous project. I have a little bit of black and I think that's either orange or brown. And I'm going to do an up and down motion on the top and bottom there, and then a swish on either side. And I'm also going to drag the brush through the middle of the wood round. I really like that effect. I really think it makes it look more like wood, even though it's already painted. So once that's done, I set it off to the side. I'm going to work on getting some color on the letters now. Yes, I forgot the letter E at the end of the word welcome, and I actually ended up doing it off camera because I didn't notice until I had already turned things off. Just using the yellow acrylic paint like I did previous, but I'm also going to add a little bit of orange because, gosh, that yellow paint is so bright, and I'm not really going for bright here. I chose the color yellow for all my projects because I wanted to show you that spring decor can be yellow without being like tacky or neon, you know. So that's kind of what my thought process was. Here I'm just trying to figure out how close to the edge I want the word spring, and I used a piece of masking tape to figure that out. Then I got those letters on just with some hot glue. I'm working really fast with that glue gun because I did not bring the charger for it. So I'm thinking at any time it's just going to stop working. So anytime I turned it on, I tried to use it as fast and as much as I could. I did end up ordering just a plug-in glue gun from Amazon, and it only took 2 days to get here. So my next video, I will have a different glue gun. You'll notice that the spacing in the word welcome is messed up. I did the W and the E first, but the inside letters ended up not having the right spacing. So while the glue was still warm, I took off a couple letters and fixed that up. And then I went over the spots left by pulling it up, just with some leftover. Well, I guess I did some new paint there. And fixed it up. And onto the flowers. So I had no trouble picking out pretty yellow flowers at this Dollarama. And I'm just going to make a couple swags for the top here. I actually had in mind like a lot of flowers for this particular project. And, you know, looking at it now, that word welcome probably could have even come down a little bit to make room for all these pretty flowers. But I'm going to make 3 swags here. So that was the first one. Those flowers remind me of like wildflowers. So cute and so pretty. And then I had some larger ones. I made 2 swags with those. And then instead of like attaching them all together, I actually hot glued them individually. So 3 swags, 3 things of glue. And really take your time with the glue, especially when you're doing flowers like this. Flowers are a little bit heavier. And you really want to make sure that glue has set and cooled before you start messing around with anything that's close to it. So I just glued each swag under the previous one. And then afterwards, I did play around with the shape of the swag. Like I tried to make it more round. Here, while we're watching, it's kind of got like almost like a triangular shape. And I did try and fix that. So same bow, awareness shape, cinched in the middle, wrapped with twine, nice tight knot in the back. And then I'll dovetail the tails. I'm going to glue it right over the top there. I also had a little piece of ribbon just to keep all the swags together. And this little butterfly was on the pick that I pulled the flowers off. So he goes right under the bow there. So pretty and a better look during the final reveal. Okay, third and final project is an Easter bunny with florals. I have this really cool rectangular sign, so I'm going to use some Mod Podge, some burlap, this pom-pom bunny kit. Too cute. And then this hanging decorations with the bunny and the eggs. I'm just going to use 1 bunny. And then this really pretty floral pick. Those all came from Dollarama. And didn't mind paying a little bit more for it because it's got the eggs and all the different flowers. Just really, really pretty. So I wanted to do some kind of border here. And I also wanted to use the burlap somehow. And originally I was going to make like a little pocket. And then I thought, well, why don't I do a border with the burlap? So, you know, 2 birds with 1 stone. So this neat little trick is to grab hold of one of the pieces of this, I don't know what you call those, like string or something, but it's basically you grab it on the bottom where you want to cut, and then you pull that little piece out. It comes out like a string, and it leaves a gap in the fabric, and then you use that gap as a guide to cut your burlap. You may be able to see that. It's a little bit hard to see there, but that's what I'm doing. I'm just pulling out a string of the burlap and using it as a guide to cut. So I'm going to use Mod Podge again, but this time I'm using it to get that burlap down. And I'm not worried about the extra Mod Podge because I am going to just drag it into the middle of the sign. So as always with burlap and Mod Podge, you want a bunch of Mod Podge underneath and a bunch of Mod Podge on top. And I do the same with both sides and the bottom. And I'm actually just using my finger to press that foam down because the foam was sucking up the Mod Podge. But there we go. We have the 2 sides in the bottom. And then I squirted out a little bit more Mod Podge to do the middle. And that's just to even things out. Now I have a strip here that I haven't Mod Podged onto the sign yet, and I'm going to put my Easter letters on there. I was going to do Happy Easter, Welcome Easter, but in the end I just did Easter. Just straightforward. I made a wash with the yellow paint and a lot of water. So this time it really was a wash. And then when I got tired of chasing the letters underneath the hairdryer, I stopped. This is what the hanging decorations look like. So I grabbed my yellow bunny and I tried putting some orange acrylic paint on it with a wet foam brush. Really didn't like how it turned out. It kind of was super uneven, kind of funny looking, but I'll fix that. I opened the little kit for the pom-pom bunnies and I took out nose and eye and the little pink parts of the ear. I'm just trying to jazz up this. It's really like a paper bunny. I mean, it's cardboard, but it's super, super thin. So I hot glued everything on there and I used the smallest white pom-pom for the tail. And you'll see up close the way the orange is kind of funky. But we're going to fix that, I promise. Just hot gluing the Easter letters onto this strip of burlap. And then I'm actually going to Mod Podge that on as well. I don't Mod Podge the top. I could have, but I wasn't sure what it would look like with a Mod Podge getting like chunked up inside the letters. So I just did it on the underneath part and then I'll hot glue it on the edges to make sure it stays. Sorry for the ambient noise there. I guess I forgot to mute that, but not too bad. My glue gun is still working on this one, so I'm going to get the edges folded over and hot glued onto the back. Then I had this bright idea to use white to soften the yellow. Like, why didn't I think of that before I put the orange on there? And I wish I had thought of it before I put the nose and ears and tail on. But, you know, I just kind of took my time and went around all the little bits and pieces. And I really like how it came out. Now I'm going to do the floral part of the sign. I really, really, really wanted to keep the pick intact, but it just wasn't looking good with the bunny, and I kind of wanted a bunny on there. So I just tore it all apart. You know, I cried a little tear, and then I tore it all apart, made like an upside down swag, and here's what it looks like, and some more views during the final reveal.